Hey guys, tonight we're exploring the people who carry everything alone and never once think to put it down and ask for help together. As we begin with a pattern that is so common, so quietly widespread, that most of the people who live with it don't even recognize it as a pattern. They just think it's who they are. The capable one, the reliable one, the one who manages. Right now, as you're watching this, someone else is watching it too. A different country, a different time zone, a different life, but the same quiet hour. Tonight we're exploring the psychology of people who never ask for help together. If this is your first video here, take a look around. Subscribe if it feels like home. And leave a comment, your location, and your time. That small act of saying, "I'm here," does something. It reminds all of us that we're not as alone in this as the dark sometimes makes us feel. Dim the lights. Maybe pull a blanket over yourself if there's one nearby. Let's begin. You know this person. Maybe you are this person. The one who, when something goes wrong, goes quiet and figures it out. Who, when asked, "Are you okay?" says yes, not always because they are, but because saying no feels like a door they don't quite know how to open. Who shows up for everyone else, remembers everyone else's struggles, checks in on everyone else, and when their own life gets hard, handles it privately, alone, in the small hours of the night when no one is watching. The capable one, the strong one, the one everyone else leans on. From the outside, this looks like strength, and in many ways it is. There is genuine resilience in these people, a real capacity to function under pressure, to keep moving when things get difficult. But there's something else in there too, something quieter, sitting just underneath the capability. A kind of loneliness that doesn't have an obvious source, a tiredness that sleep doesn't fully fix, a low-grade ache that comes from always being the person who holds things together and rarely being the person who is held. Tonight we're going to explore where that comes from. Why do some people develop such a deep resistance to asking for help? What it costs them quietly, over time, and what begins to shift when they finally let someone in. In psychology, the resistance to seeking help is rarely about pride in the simple, surface sense. It goes deeper than ego, though ego plays a role. It goes deeper than stubbornness, though stubbornness is sometimes present. At its root, the resistance to asking for help is almost always about something that was learned. Developmental psychologists who study self-reliance have found a consistent pattern. People who struggle to ask for help often grew up in environments where needing things was in some way costly, where expressing a need produced a response that made the need feel like a burden, where the adults around them were overwhelmed or emotionally unavailable, or simply unable for whatever reason to meet the child's needs consistently. The child learns the lesson that need teaches in those circumstances. They learn that needing is risky, that asking produces disappointment or impatience, or a complicated emotional response that the child then has to manage on top of the original need. So they find another way. They develop competence. They figure things out themselves. They become, often at quite a young age, extraordinarily capable, because capability is the strategy that replaced vulnerability. And it works. It gets them through. It produces real results, real achievements, a real sense of being someone who handles things. But the original lesson stays. Even when the original circumstances are long gone, even when the adults in their lives now are nothing like the adults who taught them that needing is dangerous, the nervous system keeps applying the rule. Don't ask. Handle it. You'll be fine. Here's the thing that makes this particularly hard to change. Asking for help is not simply a practical act. It is not just the transfer of a task from one person to another. It is something much more vulnerable than that. To ask for help, you have to do several things simultaneously that feel genuinely unsafe to someone who learned early that need is dangerous. You have to admit that you cannot manage alone. You have to allow another person to see you in a state of inadequacy or struggle. You have to trust that what they see won't change how they regard you. And you have to accept the possibility, the very real possibility, that they might say no, or respond inadequately, or make you feel worse than you did before you asked. For most people, this is a manageable risk. For someone whose early experiences taught them that need reliably produces disappointment, it is a risk that feels far larger than it actually is. There's also something else at work, something more specific. Many people who never ask for help have built their entire identity around not needing it. The capable one, the reliable one, the one who manages. These identities are not just external labels, they are internal structures. They are how the person understands themselves, what makes them feel safe and competent and worthy. To ask for help is, at some level, to threaten that structure. To say, actually, I am not the person I've been presenting myself as. I am someone who sometimes can't manage, someone who struggles, someone who needs. And for a person who built their sense of safety on not needing, that can feel genuinely destabilizing. The costs of never asking for help are real, and they accumulate slowly enough that they can be very hard to notice until they've been accumulating for a long time. The most obvious cost is exhaustion, not the tiredness that comes from doing too much, though that's often present too, but something more specific. The exhaustion of being the only person responsible for your own well-being, of having no one to hand things to, even temporarily, of managing everything yourself, always, with no backup. There is also the cost to relationships. Intimacy, real intimacy, requires a degree of mutual vulnerability. It requires both people to be seen in their difficulty, not just their capability. When one person in a relationship never shows need, never asks for help, is always the capable, competent one, the relationship develops a subtle imbalance. The other person may feel, without quite being able to name it, that they are never quite trusted, that they are needed but not really known. And the person who never asks begins, over time, to feel a different kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being close to people without ever quite being known by them, of being appreciated for what they do rather than loved for what they are. There is also a cost to the self, the constant management of everything, the refusal to hand things over, to allow for imperfection, to let someone else be the capable one for a while, maintains a state of low-grade vigilance that never fully switches off. The nervous system stays on alert. The body holds tension it never gets to release. And underneath it all, the emotional needs that were learned not to be expressed don't disappear. They compress. They accumulate. They eventually find expression in ways that have nothing to do with their actual source. The Stoics, who had a great deal to say about strength and self-sufficiency, were also careful to distinguish between independence of spirit, the internal freedom that cannot be taken by circumstance, and the foolish refusal of genuine human connection. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about the importance of choosing companions wisely, and then allowing those companions to actually companion you. He observed that a person who allows no one close enough to help them has not achieved freedom. They have achieved a very sophisticated form of isolation and called it strength. The ancient Greek concept of philia, deep friendship, the kind that Aristotle described as the highest form of human relationship, was explicitly built on reciprocity. Not the reciprocity of transactions, of "I did this so you owe me that," but the deeper reciprocity of mutual vulnerability, of two people willing to be known by each other, in difficulty as well as in strength. Aristotle was clear. A person who does not need other people, who is truly, completely self-sufficient, is either a god or a beast. No human being actually inhabits that state. The pretense of inhabiting it comes at the cost of the very relationships that make human life meaningful. There is also something in the Buddhist tradition worth sitting with here. The concept of accepting help, of receiving care gracefully, is understood not as weakness, but as its own practice. To allow someone to give to you, to resist the reflex to deflect or minimize or immediately reciprocate, is a practice of genuine humility. And genuine humility, in Buddhist thought, is one of the harder and more valuable human capacities. Change, for someone who has spent years or decades not asking for help, does not happen in a single dramatic moment of opening up. It happens in increments so small they're almost invisible, until one day a person looks back and realizes they've crossed a threshold they couldn't have crossed directly. It starts often with noticing the reflex, not catching it in time to do something different that comes later, but simply observing it as it happens. Something gets hard, and the automatic response is, "I'll handle this." And somewhere, slightly behind that response, a quieter voice that says, "Actually, I don't want to handle this alone." That second voice, the one that says, "I don't want to handle this alone," is important. It's the original need, still present, still intact beneath all the years of management. It surfaces sometimes in moments of great tiredness, or great difficulty, or the particular vulnerability of being sick, or grief-stricken, or at the end of a very long stretch. The first ask is rarely elegant. For someone who has built their identity around not needing, the first time they say, "I need some help with this," often feels awkward, even humiliating, even if the person they're saying it to responds with complete warmth. The discomfort is not evidence that it was wrong to ask. It is simply the nervous system encountering something unfamiliar, and the response, the way the other person receives the ask, can be genuinely revelatory. Because very often, the person you finally ask does not look at you differently, does not love you less, does not see you as less capable or less worthy. They just help, and something in you, watching this happen, begins to update the old lesson. Slowly, imperfectly, incompletely, but genuinely. Need does not always produce disappointment. Sometimes more often than the original lesson suggested, it produces connection. There's a particular quality of relief that people describe when they finally ask for help, and receive it well. That is difficult to articulate, but immediately recognizable. It is not just the relief of having the practical burden shared. It goes deeper than that. It is the relief of being seen in difficulty and still being valued, of discovering that vulnerability does not destroy the relationship but deepens it, of finding out that the person you were afraid to show your struggle to was, all along, capable of holding it. Relationships change when this happens. They become more real. The slight distance, that self-sufficiency, maintains the performance of always being fine, always managing, begins to close. And what comes into that closed space is something that was missing without quite having a name. Intimacy. Real intimacy. The kind that requires both people to be known, not just appreciated. There is also something that changes in the relationship with yourself, because carrying everything alone requires a constant, low-level self-monitoring, checking, managing, assessing, making sure you're handling it, that never fully stops. When you finally allow someone else to carry some of it, that monitoring relaxes. Not entirely, not immediately, but gradually in the places where the help was received, something unclenches. And in that unclenched space, something else becomes possible. Rest. Not just sleep, but the deeper kind. The kind where you are not, even quietly, on duty. Where someone else knows what is happening and has some of it, and you are, for a moment, genuinely off the hook. Most people who never ask for help have not experienced this in a very long time. Some of them have never experienced it at all. I want to say something simple before we move into the quiet. If you recognized yourself in this tonight, if you're someone who handles things, who manages, who shows up for everyone and carries your own difficulties in private, I don't want to tell you that you've been doing it wrong. You haven't been doing it wrong. The strategy that made you this person was built for real reasons, out of real material, in response to real experiences. It served you. It got you here. But I do want to gently suggest, not as an instruction, just as a possibility, that there might be someone in your life right now who would want to know what you're carrying. Not because you owe them that. Not because vulnerability is always safe or always the right choice, but because there might be someone who has been hoping, quietly, for the chance to be for you what you have so consistently been for everyone else. You don't have to ask tonight. You don't have to do anything with this tonight. Just let the possibility sit there, quietly, without pressure. The capable one is allowed to be held sometimes. That's not a weakness. That's the other half of being human. I want to speak slowly now to whoever is still listening. If you are someone who never asks for help, who is lying here right now with something you've been carrying alone for longer than you should have had, I want you to hear this. You are not required to carry it alone. The strength that got you here, the capability that you built, the reliability that everyone around you depends on, none of that is diminished by need. None of it is undone by struggle. None of it disappears if you put something down and say, I can't manage this part by myself. You have been the capable one for a very long time, and the capable one is tired. Not weak tired. There is a difference. Tiredness is just what happens when you have been carrying something heavy for a long time without putting it down. It doesn't mean the thing was too heavy for you. It just means you've been carrying it long enough. Tonight, just for these hours, you are allowed to put it down. Not to solve it. Not to hand it to someone else. Just to set it beside you in the dark and not hold it for a while. Let your shoulders drop. Let the part of you that is always assessing, always monitoring, always making sure everything is handled, let it rest. You have been on duty for a very long time. You are not on duty tonight. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet hold what you've been holding. And rest now. You've carried enough for tonight. More than enough. More than anyone should have to carry alone. If this reached you tonight, leave a comment. Just your city and the time. And if you want more nights like this one, subscribe. We're here every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. Same quiet place, same honest voice. Good night, wherever you are.